This is Matt Crane from MGMT Boston. On this episode of The Lantern, we have Drew Volpe, the founding partner of First Star Ventures, a cool venture firm here in Boston investing in deep tech and frontier technology. So we're here to find out what he's working on, the venture firm he's building, some things he's seen in the market, and more. So Drew, thank you so much for having me to Kendall Square to chat with you.
Thanks for coming over. Excited to be on the show.
So first and foremost, what is First Star? What is this venture firm that your team is building?
Yeah, First Star is a pre-seed hard tech fund based right here in Boston.
Very cool.
We're right here in Kendall Square. We believe that AI and new kinds of computing have completely transformed how research and development happened. And we back scientists and engineers who are using these technologies to transform big industries. We've done everything from energy to biology to robotics. And we want to be the best partner for these kinds of founders to go from an initial idea into a successful scaling startup.
Awesome. And off camera, we talked about this being the sort of biotechnology decade in terms of what is changing from a life sciences perspective and software and the collision of the two. So what is going on at First Star, in 2025 as we kind of reach that mid-year mark? What are you excited about?
Yeah, we've had a thesis around biology for a long time. We really believe that computing is taking over how biology works.
Sure.
Going back everything from genomics, allowing us to really understand what's happening in biology, to technologies like CRISPR to allow us to not just understand, but actually edit and change and things like that. We believe that's true in therapeutics. We believe it's true in synthetic biology. We believe it's true in medicine. So we have a really interesting company in Harvard Square called VistaPath that does pathology using computer vision and new kinds of AI.
Nice. And you've learned a lot. Previously you were a builder at companies like Endeca. Now you're an investor. So whether it's sort of investing or building, maybe a two-part question. What have you learned from building startups that you would pass back to founders, up-and-coming operators, et cetera? And then I'm going to ask you about the investor side.
Yeah, so I've had a great career here in Boston. I've been part of exits for tens of millions, hundreds of millions, one more than $1 billion, and a few that didn't go anywhere.
Sure.
I think one of the biggest things I've learned across that is just how long the journey is, and really appreciating that it's a really hard, arduous journey. So everything from understanding who your co-founders are, who your advisors are, who's on your cap table, those things matter. And I think the founders that have the patience and the vision to not just worry about what this quarter or this year will be like, but what's the company I want to build 5 years from now are the ones that are successful.
Definitely. And now as an investor, investing in companies, figuring out how to raise capital, how to execute, bringing employees into the business, founders sort of, designing a vision. What advice would you give back to maybe other fellow investors or even just founders thinking about starting out?
Yeah, one thing I didn't appreciate and I think is very, very important, and the more startups I do, the more I realize how important is your network.
Sure.
I think both inside Boston, but also getting on a train, heading down to New York, getting on a plane, heading out to the Bay.
Right.
Like just the more connections you make with investors, with other founders, with other executives, the highest surface area of luck you give yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And last but not least, how can we help you? How can we help First Star grow in Boston and far beyond?
Yeah, well, I love what you're doing. I think one of Boston's, things we don't do well is storytelling. I think our startups are doing really amazing things in energy and biotechnology. Like we were just talking about, there's 2 fusion companies in Cambridge alone, which is pretty amazing.
Yes.
But we haven't done a good job is telling the world about all the good things we're doing. So I think building that muscle group of how our founders can tell the story of what they're doing to the world, and also too, just creating stages like you do for our startups is really important for us as an ecosystem.
Yeah. Tell a friend, seize the distribution that you deserve in the world. This is Drew from First Star, Matt from MGMT Boston, in this episode of The Lantern. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot for having me.